Let's go Eagles! I confess that I was very excited about the latest information that arrived in the last few hours. The Eagles just made a move that left the rest of the league in shambles, and if you weren't paying attention, you may not realize how big this is. While everyone was focused on the usual free agency buzz, Howie Roseman was quietly making plans and goals, making moves that will take many people by surprise, and that can certainly change the future of the franchise. This GM of ours is very intelligent and strategic. If you agree that Howie Roseman is the best general manager we could have, hit the like button hard. If possible, write something like this: Go Eagles! Let's fly higher. There is a change happening right now at the Philadelphia Eagles, and some of your favorite players may not be here when the dust settles. Let me explain what's going on. First, let's address what just happened. The Eagles have locked up one of their biggest defensive pieces for the future, Zach Bond. The 3-year, $51 million deal with $34 million guaranteed officially makes him the highest-paid linebacker in Eagles history. If you're thinking, wait, Zach Bond? The same guy who was primarily a special teams player a year ago? Yeah, that guy. But here's the thing. His 2023 season wasn't just good, it was historic. 151 tackles, 5 forced fumbles, 11 tackles for loss, and a spot as a Defensive Player of the Year finalist. That wasn't a fluke. This was the emergence of a defensive leader, and Howie Roseman made sure he was sticking around. But while that's great news for the Eagles' linebacker core, it's just the beginning of what could be a wild offseason. There are rumblings, big ones, about the future of Josh Sweat and Milton Williams. With Max Crosby's new $35.5 million per year contract resetting the market for edge rushers, it's now clear that Sweat is about to get paid, and not by the Eagles. Roseman has a history of letting pass rushers walk if the price gets too high, and if Sweat commands upwards of $20 million per year, Philly might take the compensatory picks and move on. Same goes for Milton Williams. It's a tough pill to swallow, but that's the reality when you're building for long-term success. And then there's the drama in the secondary. Darius Slay and C.J. Gardner-Johnson might have just had a moment that could shut the door on Slay's return. After Slay called Reed Blankenship the leader of the secondary, CJGJ wasn't exactly thrilled, posting on Twitter about sneak dissing. It's not the first time these two have had a public disagreement, but the fact that this is surfacing now, right when Slay's future is in question, might be all you need to know. Of course, Slay downplayed it, saying it's all love, but let's be real. If there's tension in the locker room, Howie Roseman isn't one to sit back and let it fester. If the Eagles truly believed Slay was their guy for another season, they wouldn't have let him hit the open market in the first place. Add in the fact that the Eagles are prioritizing younger, more affordable players on defense, and it's hard to see a scenario where Slay is back in midnight green. And speaking of players potentially on the move, let's talk about what's next for the Eagles. With around $20 million in cap space left, they still have some big decisions to make. The name to watch? Mekhi Becton. The offensive line is a priority, and with reports suggesting Becton could be open to a Philly discount, this deal could happen sooner rather than later. Then there's Cam Jurgens, who could be in line for a long-term extension. And don't sleep on the possibility of a Dallas Goedert contract restructure. Freeing up more cap space could be the key to adding one final piece before the draft. But let's circle back to the biggest takeaway here. The Eagles are building for sustained dominance, not just a one-year run. They're locking in foundational pieces like Zach Bond. They're being strategic about where they spend their money. And they're making the tough calls on players who might be fan favorites but don't fit into the long-term plan. It's not always easy to say goodbye to key contributors, but this is what separates contenders from teams stuck in mediocrity. So now I turn it over to you. What do you think? Are you all in on the Eagles' strategy, or are there moves you're still waiting to see? Let me know in the comments. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe because we'll be covering every move the Birds make this offseason. Stay tuned. There's a lot more coming. And if you thought that was all, buckle up, because we haven't even gotten to the most underrated move the Eagles are setting up for. With the focus on free agency, a lot of people are sleeping on what Howie Roseman is positioning himself to do in the draft. This is where things get really interesting. If Josh Sweat and Milton Williams both walk in free agency, the Eagles could be looking at getting 2 third-round compensatory picks in 2026. Now, imagine what Howie can do with that kind of draft capital. We've seen it before. When he's got extra picks, he gets aggressive. And if you're thinking, yeah, but that's 2 years away, let me remind you, Howie is always playing the long game. He's stacking assets, giving himself flexibility, and setting the Eagles up to stay ahead of the competition.
But the real wild card here? The pass rush situation. With Sweat likely gone, that leaves a massive hole in the rotation. The name Joey Bosa has been floating around since his release from the Chargers. But let's be honest, does that even make sense? The dude has been plagued by injuries, and we all remember how Eagles fans got under his skin last time he was in Philly. You think he's signing up for round 2 of that? Doubt it. And yet, the Eagles do need an answer on the edge. Could it be through the draft? Could it be a surprise trade? We don't know yet, but we do know that Howie isn't going to leave that spot unaddressed. And if you're still not convinced that Howie is cooking up something big, let's talk about the offensive line. We already mentioned the possibility of signing Mekhi Becton, but there's another layer to this. The Chicago Bears just traded for Joe Thuney instead of waiting to sign a free agent offensive lineman. That tells us 2 things. 1, quality. O-linemen are hard to come by. And 2, the Eagles need to act fast if they want to lock in their future. Could this be the year they finally take an offensive lineman in the first round? It wouldn't be shocking, especially with Jason Kelce officially retiring and Cam Jurgens likely sliding to center. And speaking of veteran leaders, that brings us back to the secondary drama. Here's why this whole Darius Slay versus C.J. Gardner-Johnson situation matters more than people realize. Leadership on defense is everything. When Slay went on the Micah Parsons podcast and put CJ on blast for giving up a touchdown, it was one thing. But now, with CJ firing shots back at Slay on Twitter, it feels like something deeper. Slay is out here saying Reed Blankenship is the leader of the secondary. But the fact that CJ took offense to that tells us there's some unresolved tension. And if the Eagles had any serious plans of bringing Slay back, do you think we'd be seeing this kind of drama play out in public? No shot. Let's be real. This is a team transitioning to a new era. The old guard is moving on. The young core is stepping up. And Howie Roseman is making the tough decisions that need to be made. And if you're still wondering whether this team will be aggressive in making moves, let me remind you, Howie has around $20 million in cap space left. He's not done yet. Whether it's locking in Cam Jurgens long-term, restructuring Dallas Goedert's deal to free up more money, or adding one more key veteran to the defense, something is coming. So now, the question is, what do you think happens next? Are you ready for the Eagles to fully embrace this new generation, or are there players you think Howie needs to bring back? Do you trust the direction of the team, or is there a move you're still waiting to see? Drop your thoughts in the comments.